Welcome to the Nourished Child podcast. It's so lovely to have you here. And I'm excited for my audience of parents and healthcare professionals to learn about your expertise. You focus on teenagers, which, boy, that is a budding and emerging area of concern in pediatric nutrition, probably in psychology as well. But please, before we get started with our conversation, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this line of work.
Um, well, I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for having me. And I really love talking. I love talking about teenagers, which surprises some people. So I am an adolescent psychologist. I've been doing this. I can't quite believe for almost 25 years, and I think I was always drawn to psychology and to sort of helping other people. But I think when I reflect on that, what I've always been drawn to is connecting with other people. I think that's what really it was that drew me into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I just enjoy working with teenagers. I think there's a lot of energy, and it's such a challenging but also interesting time where people, kids, teens are really trying to figure out who they are and what's important to them and what do they think about the world and themselves. And I think in order to work with teenagers, you have to really love them.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, how I got into it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you are a Massachusetts-based
I am
therapist. So,
based in Massachusetts. Um, I do have licenses in a few other states
yep.
that happened during COVID. So I'm here in Massachusetts, but I can work virtually in Vermont and Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really starting to enjoy speaking and getting outside of my office. And so I'm hoping to bring my message, outside of Massachusetts, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yep.
I was just talking with a colleague of mine this morning, and I said, how are you doing? How's life? And she said, oh my goodness, these teenagers are killing me.
Yep.
And she is a 15-year-old and a soon to be 13-year-old.
Yep.
And she was commenting that her husband uh, remarked, was the older one this bad? And she said, yes, you've just forgotten.
Yep.
And I had to laugh because I've been through, and we talked about this before, but I've raised 4 teenagers. We've gone through the adolescent phase 4 times. And I jokingly say, well, not jokingly, I seriously say, I never thought I ever had anxiety
Yep.
before I had teenagers.
Yep.
And that really spiked my own anxiety.
Well, it's really hard. And I think it's interesting. I've reflected a little bit on what are the commonalities between being a psychologist and also being a parent. But I think, what's really hard about teenagers is that it really requires a lot of ourselves as parents. It really can, teenagers, we'll get into talking about the development and the brain, but, there's a lot of things happening where they have really big feelings and they have really, they're starting to have really big thoughts and there can be really strong shifts that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really challenging for the people around them. And it's also, they push back. And that's what's also important and hard about teenagers is that they actually really need something to sort of bump up against in order to figure out who they are and what they think and what's important. And so that requires a lot from us as the people and the sort of values and ideals that they are bumping up against.
Yeah. And I know for my own self, I oftentimes would think, well, I wasn't allowed to talk back to my parents. What gives you the right to talk back to me? Or I would think, I have done all these things for you. Why are you treating me so poorly?
Right. Which is another way of saying, like, we all come to this with our own experiences and values and rules and understandings. that factor in addition to which, you didn't quite say this, but I think this is there too, is that every teenager is different, just like every child is different. And so, the rules or what you allow or what you accept, like those things might be different with each child or each client, because every kid has a different set of needs and strengths and challenges.
So that's so interesting because it partly explains why why my older two were like, you never let us do anything and you let the younger two do everything. Well, their personalities were so different.
Right. And you were probably different too, right? Because
Yes.
your own anxiety or values or sort of what you learned, and what you could sort of tolerate, is different.
Yeah. Evolved.
Evolved.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about adolescent development and the tasks of adolescence.
Yep.
I recently was at a summit around the topic of teenagers, and one of the presenters said that teenagers operate from their amygdala, which is their emergency control center, not their frontal cortex, which is their executive planner and thoughtfulness and thinking through things. So tell us, what you see as the developmental tasks of adolescence and how that applies to raising teenagers.
Yep. Such an important question, and I think what your differentiation of the amygdala from the frontal cortex, prefrontal cortex, is, there's also brain development that's happening, and that's the last to get pruned and developed. So a lot of the tasks parallel the changes that are happening in the brain and the body. So what are the primary tasks of adolescence are, I think, to sort of separation and individuation, thinking about their identity, and who they are, being able to have increased responsibility for their own self-care and sort of bodily tasks, and ultimately independence, and thinking about, longer term career and sort of life choices. So I like to say that there are physical changes that are happening in the body and in the brain. And there are emotional changes that are happening, psychological changes. And there's also a lot of social changes that are happening. So we can't talk about adolescence without talking about the social context.
Right.
And so that's another task of adolescence, is developing a sort of group belonging or a social identity, a peer group. So those are the tasks that are happening. In the context of all of those tasks, there's experimentation and risk taking. That is a big part of adolescence. Learning to deal with their feelings. Like I said before, they have really big feelings, and they feel really sort of intense and consuming in the moments that they're having these feelings. So learning to deal with their emotions, learning to deal with their self in relation to other, having self-esteem and competency, adjusting to the physical changes that are happening. Their bodies are changing. They're changing in a public way. They can't control the changes that are happening. There's increased demands in terms of like sexuality and intimacy. And I think where I was blanking is that all of these things are happening in the context of our own expectations of what our teens should be doing, or comparing them to other teenagers. And they're also happening in the context of what we have now, this sort of very public sort of social media, digital age where
Mhm.
they are flooded with messages about what they should be doing, what teens are like, and what the expectations are. So it's a really complex set of what's happening in the brain, what's happening psychologically and emotionally, what's happening sort of in the culture of our families, and then these sort of broader social digital realms.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Um, and you didn't mention puberty, but I
Yes.
know from a physical change standpoint, for many for many teens, they are not anticipating those changes. And I'm not just saying, they're not anticipating breast development or anything like that. They are anticipating those things,
Sure.
but they're not anticipating what the outcome is going to look like. And is that outcome going to look like what they see on social media?
Absolutely. And can they, do they have any like sort of ownership or control over the outcome? And I think there's a real difference, and I think this happens at every life stage where we may intellectually or cognitively know what is coming.
Hmm.
Right, we know our bodies are going to change. We know we're going to graduate from high school. But we don't really know what that is going to feel like,
Right.
or what that is going to be like, or what that's going to bring up for ourselves and for other people. And I think, yes, how could I have not mentioned puberty, right? Because that is what's happening, sort of again, biologically, hormonally, physically, and emotionally.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of liken it to I'm somebody who's in menopause, knew it was coming,
Sure.
uh, thought I was ready for it in the midst of it, like, oh my gosh, nobody told me
Yes.
how hard this was going to be
Right.
from the physical standpoint, from the
Right.
emotional standpoint. I mean, not to mention, I had teenagers when I was,
Sure.
you know, perimenopausal. So, like, we know that the science tells us, that anxiety spikes and all this stuff. And it's like, I can empathize with a teenager because I think it's very much now looking back, it's probably very similar to significant life changes like menopause for
Yeah.
women,
Yeah.
midlife crises for
Yeah.
men.
Well, I think that's that same dynamic. I think it's such a good comparison because we don't talk about a lot of things enough. And so, right, we don't talk about about all these changes that are happening for adolescents in a really sort of thoughtful and sensitive and empathic way, just
Mhm.
like we don't talk about menopause. So nobody told me. Also, maybe you weren't ready, or maybe you weren't interested, or maybe you weren't able to sort of hear and take in because you just weren't there yet.
Yeah.
And so I think that happens for teenagers and parenting too, is that we sort of know, but we're too caught up in what's happening when they're 12 or 10, or every stage feels like it's a very important and sort of poignant stage. And nobody can really tell you what it's going to be like for you.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, given all these changes that are going on,
Yeah.
physical, psychological, emotional, social, how do parents build a strong relationship with their teen?
Yeah, that is the most important question, because I think that I think parenting matters so much, which is why I'm here and why I do what I do, um, because I think it's so important. And the relationship that you have with your teen is like that's going to last you your whole life, or their whole life. Um, so I think there's a lot of things that parents can do. First and foremost, I think we have to separate ourselves and our own sort of feelings and issues, anxieties, expectations from your kid. And so I think we really have to be able to separate that and see our teens for who they are and what they bring to the world and to the relationship. So separation is important. Um, I, I cannot underscore enough curiosity, listening, empathy, validating, just being curious and supportive and accepting of your teen. Um, it, it is, it's not that easy, especially when our own emotions get dysregulated. But it's so, so important because teenagers need to see that they are, that they matter, that they are loved, that they are accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And also, while we are being empathic and validating and curious and supportive, we also need to have limits.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have expectations. We need to have rules. We need to have, like I said before, that those things that they can bump up against, um, in a sort of understanding and empathic way. As an example, I have 3 teenagers in my home, and my teenagers didn't get social media, didn't get those sorts of things when their friends did. And the way that I sort of handled that was I said, this is my rule and this is my value. And I'm sorry if that makes your life harder. I'm sorry if I understand, right, that not having social media as a middle schooler or a high schooler, I understand that that's going to create some challenges for you. And I'm here to, I'm curious your feelings about that. And if it ever gets to a point where you really feel like, you have a strong reason or there's something coming up that's really hard for you, then I want you to talk to me about it. And maybe, I'm not making any promises here, but maybe I will change my stance. But being able to sort of hold the rule and while also being empathic and understanding, I think is really important.
Yeah. I like that. We did that with my oldest. I think she wanted a Facebook or a phone. I can't remember which. And we told her she couldn't have anything till 8th grade, which, that was probably 15 years ago.
Wow.
But believe it or not, Facebook was just coming out.
Yes.
Everybody had it.
Yes.
And simultaneously, everybody was getting phones, even just for safety and tracking.
Yeah.
And we were like, no.
Yeah.
These are our
It's
rules.
really
I'm
hard.
sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry that this is not what you want to hear, but these are our rules. And that was it. I mean, I find that too, understanding and empathy, absolutely. I think the hardest thing, just for myself as having gone through this, was separating myself.
Yeah.
Really being able to, like, they're going to make a mistake.
Yep.
What they want to do is not a good idea.
Yep.
Or, aside from keeping them safe, even just going to the coffee shop every morning and spending all their money on a coffee drink. You want to say, you bite your tongue and say, you've worked so hard all weekend for that cash and you're just going to drop it off at the
It's
coffee shop.
That's like so many sort of lights are going off in my brain as to where the way to respond to that brings up so many things, right? Because it takes a lot of skill and effort in yourself to take a deep breath and to pause and to really think about what's going on here and what alarm bells are going off for me and why am I anxious about this and what am I afraid of? And I talked about the developmental tasks of adolescence, but I think there's developmental parenting tasks, right? Which is that, we're so used to making these decisions, and being in control and having a say, and we have to wean ourselves off of that too. And we have to let them make mistakes, which is really hard. We have to let them exercise their own beliefs and decision making, even if it doesn't align with our own. Even if, maybe they will find that they've spent too much money and, have none left. But that's kind of how they learn. Adolescents learn from experiencing and doing. They don't learn as well from us telling. And so in order for them to really learn, they have to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And we have to trust in that process and in ourselves and in our kids.
Yeah.
And that is something that, when we talk about body image, when we talk about eating, when we talk about adolescence, like that is something that I think is so like critical, is being able to trust and to tolerate.
Yeah. Yeah. So that sort of makes me think about helping adolescents cope with their emotions, with their setbacks, their disappointments. And I know from, my arena of healthcare, nutrition, I know that a lot of adolescents use food to cope with their emotions, to cope with boredom, to cope with isolation, loneliness. And that isn't necessarily a healthy way of coping. I mean, I think there's I as a professional have a tolerance for some level of coping with food, because food can be very useful in moments sometimes when we need to cope. However, and I'd be interested in what you think about this, but however, relying on food and certain eating behaviors as the coping mechanism, the go-to crutch, if you will, is not healthy. So can we talk about how adolescents cope? Maybe that's differently from adults based on their brain stage and stage of development, how they cope, and what are some examples of healthy coping versus unhealthy coping?
Okay. So this is a really important topic. So I think that teenagers, really kids, youth, learn coping from the people and the world around them. And so when we talk about, I always bring it back to parenting. Unfortunately, it's a really hard job to be a parent. But when we think about coping, we also have to think about, what are we modeling? So that's important to say. And that if parents have their own sort of struggles with food and body, kids are going to pick up on that. So that's one piece of what you're talking about. Another thing about coping, and specifically coping with food, is that in a way, how could we not expect teenagers to use food as a coping strategy, as one of many? Because our entire culture is based on this idea, or a big part of our culture, that, I mean, our culture actually tells kids that if you don't feel good about yourself, or you are having a bad, you're having a bad day, or the way to be seen as liked is to look a certain way and to eat a certain way. And so how could kids not internalize that message, that what they eat matters, that what they look like matters, and to use food as a way to feel good about themselves, or behaviors around food? I remember way back when I started doing this work, I sort of remember looking at like covers of Cosmopolitan magazine, or, advertisements where, if you look at the media, it really does tell you that like chocolate is an escape, right? Chocolate is a way of coping. I mean, it sort of looks like almost like, I mean, it's like sexualized in a lot of ways too, right? There is this way in which the media promises that food is a way of feeling better about yourself. And there's a lot of research, obviously, in the brain, right? When food creates pleasure, right? Like it sets off neurotransmitters that create an effect in our brain that is pleasurable. So, and I think you're right. I think that there's lots of wonderful ways in which food is is positive.
Mhm.
It also in our culture is social, right? I mean, it's a way that people connect and join around food and enjoyment. So we also really have to be careful not to make it not okay, but to increase mindfulness around eating behaviors and food and coping.
Mhm.
So, um, okay, so how do teenagers cope? um, so teenagers cope by doing things that are fun and enjoyable and active and like, participating in activities, sports, art, music,
Mhm.
performing, creative expression. Those are all really wonderful ways that teenagers can cope with things. Um, I talk a lot about music with my teenage clients because I think music really hits at those parts of the brain
Mhm.
that are that get lit up in adolescence,
Mhm.
just like art and expression, writing, journaling. Those are really great ways that teenagers can cope.
Mm.
Um, Friends and social connections are a really big part for teenagers of
Yeah.
coping and
Yeah.
feeling good.
Yeah.
Um, I am increasingly in my practice moving towards, I mean, talking is always important,
Mhm.
insight, understanding, expressing. But I'm increasingly moving towards sort of more physical ways of coping,
Mm.
um, movement, yoga,
Yeah.
mindfulness, and meditation. I
Mhm.
recently did a training in tapping where I think, sort of like just neurologically, we need to have ways to help our systems self-regulate.
Yeah.
Because I think just going through the day and getting stimulated and getting all of these inputs, like it's a lot for our physiologic systems.
Mhm.
And so I think having ways to turn down the volume.
Yeah.
um,
I love tapping. I actually use it myself when I'm nervous about speaking
uh-huh.
in front of a crowd. It really helps me calm down and just center myself. So it makes a lot of sense that that would be effective with teenagers.
Yeah.
I
Well,
love
I
that.
think it's those self-regulation sort of strategies.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, of course, we first have to have that alarm bell that goes off that says ding, ding, like something is going on here and
Yeah.
I need to do something to self-regulate.
Yes.
Um, so that's where like self-monitoring and self-awareness can be really important.
Yeah. What are some of the more harmful coping mechanisms? We talked about eating. I mean, I'm thinking along the lines you're an eating disorder specialist.
Mhm.
You've worked in the field for a long time,
Yep.
so binging and purging is comes to my mind.
Sure.
Um, uh, just starvation is another coping mechanism, I
Yep.
imagine. But outside of eating and food, what are some of the other common coping mechanisms that you're seeing? um,
Great question. So I always think too about it's not only the what, but it's the why.
yes.
Because a lot of those behaviors, like exercise, for example,
Mm.
exercise can be movement, can be a really positive coping strategy, and it also can be not a very healthy coping strategy. So it's always about sort of what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Um, I think that certainly using substances is a not so healthy behavior.
Yeah.
Self harm is a not so healthy behavior. But even the way that people are using social media or technology, right, sort of zoning out or being not being mindful and just sort of endless scrolling, or even for myself, I when there's events going on in the world, I can notice myself getting consumed and sort of like looking to social media for information, but in a way that is actually not helpful.
What was coming to mind for me was oftentimes in my past, I've worked with eating disorder clients as well. And the exercise piece really sort of sent off a little bell in my head because oftentimes, and this is something that I think maybe we could dive into a little bit deeper, as you mentioned, the why. Why is this child going to the gym so much? Right. To a parent, that can appear so healthy.
It can.
It can be like, oh, I'm so happy my child is working out every day. They're eating so healthfully. And yet that can be a real slippery slope.
And this whole issue of what is healthy is so tricky in our culture. And I think there are these real sort of beliefs about, sort of health at any cost. Like there's sort of this one size fits all definition and value on healthy. And, I see a lot of people who are trying to be so healthy that they are not healthy.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's, I think, how a lot of eating disorders start. And so we really have to think of, again, I'm sorry to keep saying, right, like you have to really think about things because it's really exhausting and it's really hard, but I think we have to do it. Why do we think this is healthy, and what is our definition of health? What is not happening at the expense of health? That is, getting healthy is oftentimes a trigger to developing an unhealthy relationship with food and body. So we really have to look at that really carefully.
Yeah. And so what would your advice be for a parent who wants to make sure that their teenager is developing a healthy relationship with food and their bodies?
Yeah. So a healthy relationship. So let's think about what is a healthy relationship with food and with your body, right? And, the way I define that is that it is coming more from the inside than the outside. And it is really an individual idea about what is healthy for me. What are the foods that I enjoy? What are the foods that feel and taste and sort of nourish and empower me?
Yeah.
It doesn't involve shoulds. It's not based on weight. That is really, really, really important because I think so much in this diet culture that we live in is that, health is equated with size and with weight.
Yeah.
And it's that is not what health is.
No.
Health can exist at any size.
Yes.
And it really requires a lot of, again, internal thinking and work and strength at being able to embrace a healthy for me attitude, because that can feel a little isolating, or it can feel like when you are rejecting the ideas of the culture, it can be really hard.
Yeah.
But it's really important. So those are the things, when I think about health, I think about really coming from a place, from an internal place.
It is difficult, I think, even as a professional, but definitely as a parent, to convey neutrality around food and bodies in an arena where that's all that's talked about.
Right.
That's all you see all day long. And so I know lots of parents want to ensure that that they're raising kids with a healthy body image and a healthy relationship with food. And it does, so much of it is seated in sort of the family culture and the parent model, and the parenting in general, right?
And I think what's really important is, as a female, as a mom, as a parent, right? Like it's really easy to blame. And I think we need to be really careful not to blame.
Yeah.
Because, parents, families, like we all got here because of these in the context of all of these larger things that are happening in our culture. And it's really not our faults. We really are doing the best we can based on what we know and what we've experienced.
Right.
But it is really important to think about what your own biases, what your own experiences have been like, and, in sort of how you might be unconsciously or unwittingly communicating some of these ideas and beliefs and values.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to be non-judgmental, to be accepting, to really, one of the most important things we can do as parents is not to talk critically about our own bodies, about our kids' bodies, about other people's bodies,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we can talk about bodies, but there's not really a good or a bad body,
Right.
even though that is the idea that exists out there in the culture, right?
Yeah.
That you have to look a certain way in order to be valued or seen positively.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really hard.
It's yeah.
For our last sort of question, and this is just sort of a, what do you wish for teenagers? What do you wish for parents and their teens? If you had a magic wand and you could, rewrite the script, if you will, what is it that you want parents to know about teens, or to do with teens, or to not do with teens? What's sort of your take-home message here?
So my take-home message is that teenagers are amazing, and they have so much sort of wisdom. They actually do have a lot of like ideas and opinions and strength and wisdom. And I want teenagers to be seen for that. Um, I think that kids, and really all of us, we need to know that we matter for who we are on the inside and not for what we look like. I think we need to feel like kids, especially, need to feel like they are loved, that they are connected. Um, and that I think that one of the reasons why I think it's so important to talk about this and to sort of share my message is that when you are a parent in isolation, it can feel daunting and overwhelming and sort of feel like, how can I change this? Right? Like when I see people in my office and I say, could you have a conversation that's not about dieting? Or, could you eat a normal meal? And they look and say, but nobody else is, right? It can feel that way, but we need to connect with, there are lots of people that are having these conversations, and that we can build a community and we can change the norm, right? We can change the norm that sort of fat or, certain ways of looking are not okay, because everybody is okay. We are okay as we are. And I want kids and parents to know that and to feel that.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That's great. I 100% agree with you. I think one of the most valuable, so I always say it's not really about the food. It's about the feelings. I mean, you want your child to come to the table excited to be together, and you want them to leave satisfied, whether that be physically, emotionally, psychologically.
It's all the above.
Yeah.
And, you just said one thing that I think is also really, really important, which is that feelings really matter. And, feelings aren't like, when we talk about the mental health crisis, or like mental health and wellness is not, we have to just, feel good all the time.
Right.
It is about learning to acknowledge and accept that we have all sorts of feelings, and we have skills and ways that we can deal with those feelings. And that's what mental health is a way of just being able to acknowledge and sort of identify and feel and tolerate our feelings, and have healthy ways of coping with those feelings.
Yeah. Well said, Emily Gordon. Where
Thank
can
you.
people find you if they want to connect further with you?
So my website's probably the best way. DrEmilyGordon.com, DrEmilyGordon. That's probably the best way. I do have a Facebook page. I try to practice what I'm not a big social media person, but so probably, my website, LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much. It was lovely to talk with you.
And it was lovely to talk with you too. Thanks so much for coming on the show. And thanks for taking care of our teenagers.
Yeah. Thank you. You too.
Thanks for listening to The Nourished Child. Many thanks also to Dr. Emily Gordon for sharing her wisdom, her time, and her insight for you all. We know it's not easy to raise teens, but if you have kids, you have to get through it. I've done it 4 times. She is in the thick of it with her 3 teenagers, and we're here to support you should you need it. Make sure you check out her website, emilygordon.com, and reach out to her should you want to pursue a connection with her. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support this show and my work, please take a minute to follow the podcast, leave a rating and review, and visit thenourishedchild.com to sign up for my weekly newsletter, The Munch. You can also follow me on Instagram at IamPDRD, and don't forget to take the Healthy Habits quiz on thenourishedchild.com. My book, Kids Thrive at Every Size: How to Nourish Your Big, Small, or In-Between Child for a Lifetime of Health and Happiness, is available wherever you purchase books. I hope you've got a copy of it. If you don't, now's the time to go grab one. You'll learn about the whole child healthy model, the 8 pillars of wellness, and how you can raise a healthy child who also feels good about themselves, which is so very important in our society and culture today. That's it, friends. You know what I always say. Make sure you give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.